presentation and choose mute original audio, and that will be en español. Now we'll proceed with the roll call. Commissioner Arias.
Present.
Police Chief Azopardi.
Present.
Commissioner Balmas. Commissioner Faria.
Here.
City Manager Mike Futrell.
Present.
Commissioner Ibasan. Commissioner McGovern. Commissioner Monzon. Trustee Pat Murray. I know she won't be here today. She has sent her regrets. Council Member or Vice Mayor Nagales.
Here.
Commissioner Powers.
Here.
Commissioner Rivera. Commissioner Vaughn. Commissioner Fernandez. I saw her logged in. Andrea, are you here?
I don't think that I saw her.
I thought I did.
There's one phone number, 415, ending in 1069. I'm just gonna ask them to unmute for a second. Are you a commissioner or not? Because I'm not sure if you're calling in as a commissioner.
Nope, not calling in as a commissioner.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much.
Do we have a quorum?
I do not have a quorum at this time. I need one more commissioner.
Madam Chair, would it still be okay? I guess we have to ask if we could just start the presentation and then see if we have a quorum as we move along.
What is, so who can make that decision for us? Mike?
It's Guy. Since Guy's on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's our city attorney.
I just promised.
Yeah, I know. That was a short-lived promise. I think that it's fine without a quorum to begin it as a presentation. And then if we get to the end of the presentation and there's hopefully by the time that ends, there will be a quorum of the commission and you'll be able to conduct business. And if not, we'll have to figure it out from there.
Oh, I think Gladys just joined. So.
Who just did?
Gladys.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Gladys. Welcome, Gladys.
Hello.
Okay, there we go. So I'll go over to slide 4, right? Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We had our very first meeting on August 10th, and that was 9 months ago. However, it seems like it was ages ago when we started this commission's journey. 9 months, and if we were a pregnant woman, we are getting ready for the birth of our baby. We have finished the first 2 phases and now embarking on the 3rd and final phase. I would like to thank all of you for your dedication and grit, reminded by the words of Sheryl Sandberg, the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook and a best-selling author. We cannot change what we are not aware of. And once we are aware, we cannot help but change. I'm sure throughout this, we had gained greater awareness, and that's inevitable. I'm hoping we have changed, and that change is for the better of our community and our city. Now, we'll proceed with the approval of the minutes of the meeting of April 21st. I'm hoping that everybody has a chance to go over it. And if you do, I will entertain a motion and a second.
Madam Chair, I would make the motion to approve the minutes.
And I would second, Madam Chair.
It has been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the April 21st meeting. And now if you approve, click raise hand in the bottom right corner of the participants sidebar. I'm looking at it and I can't find mine.
Oh.
So.
I don't think I have it as well, Madam Chair.
Gladys, are you trying to raise your hand?
Looks like Kayla and Gladys are. So Mark,
Yes.
yeah, some of you are certainly able to. I'm still not sure why some people can't. So if you can't raise your hand virtually, please turn your video on, commissioners, and raise your hand, and Lisa will this with the.
Thank you. The motion is passed.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm having a, okay, great. So we are rounding the home stretch towards completing the work we were commissioned to do, and that is address racial and social inequity here in South San Francisco. We have successfully researched, benchmarked, and received public insights on the issues surrounding systemic racism and social inequity. The information we have gathered and studied is at the foundation of the goals, strategies, and ultimate recommendations we will make to the mayor and the city council. Our next phase involves the timely completion of our final report. Our consulting team is working on the final report draft that will be sent to each one of us for our advanced review and comment. As you can imagine, it will be a lengthy document, and it's important and very important that we allot enough time for review. This means we are pressing the team to complete the report in record time. In view of this, we would like to postpone the June meeting to make the completion of the draft report our highest priority for the next several weeks. If needed, we can consider adding a meeting to the schedule after June. I know that all of us have full plates and will need time to go over such a lengthy document. We want to be respectful of everyone's time while ensuring that we can all focus on the details of the draft. Please let me know by next week via email if you agree with making space for the completion of the document and ready for the review and your comments. Okay, so next slide. Yeah. So for today, we will review the accomplishments we had in phase 1 and phase 2 and provide overview of phase 3. We will review and gather the commissioner's feedback and updated vision statement. We will also gather feedback on draft rationale and outcomes for goals 1 and 2. Now I'll turn over to Kim.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to be here with you this afternoon. My name is Kim Dorman from Ramey & Associates, and I'm here with Paige Cruzan Nayeli Bernal. And today's agenda is pretty packed, like most of the times that we've had a chance to be with you. I think the big picture is that we really want to get your feedback on the vision and have an opportunity to review the updated vision statement in small groups and also the draft rationales for the goals 1 and 2. And then we'll have public comment and commission discussion after that, followed by a brief overview of the draft outcomes for each of the strategies. We'll also have a public comment and commission discussion after that. So we're anticipating ending around 6:25, 6:30. And I will turn it over to Myra for our grounding exercise.
So we will quickly do a grounding exercise. And the spirit of this question is, here's the bottom line on it. We all have been a part of things where we're on fire. You know, we are really passionate about getting something done. This report is going to be a long one. It's addressing so many areas and so many details. How do we make sure it becomes part of the city's DNA? How do we make sure it has stickability, if that's a word? How do we make sure of that? And I'm asking the commissioners to sort of volunteer their thoughts just very quickly. A few of you maybe tell us, how do you think we can make this stick and keep this going? Commissioner Gladys?
I think being very concrete about to keep accountability of the work is going to be very important.
That is good. Anyone else?
Just to add to that, and being concrete about who is accountable for what, and including the ability to be accountable for that in reviews, in hiring criteria, etc.
It will be very disappointing that you know, what we have done will not be, if it will not be sustained. So it really will be a shame. So we have to make sure that there is a sustained change, and it can only be achieved if we do practice what we are saying.
I know the agenda's long, so unless there's anyone else, I'll give it back over to Kim.
Well, thank you. I think it's a great question, and maybe if we have time at the end, we can keep asking more perspectives on this. I think it is critical to think about how we maintain this work and this momentum. Speaking of the work, wanted to just quickly go over the phases again. We've been through phase 1 and 2. We're beginning phase 3 and anticipate ending very soon. The topics that we have covered include many of them, as you know: health and social services, public safety, policing, education, housing, economic development, big topics, critical topics related to racial and social equity. And then we also were able to prioritize approaches that turned into strategies that will make up the report that we are currently working on. And that got us through to today. Phase 1 and phase 2 accomplishments include reviewing 27 approaches and looking at the data related to those, hearing from 164 survey respondents from the community, prioritizing 11 approaches for year 1 implementation, and hearing from 13 guest speakers and participating, if you count today, in 12 commission meetings so far. So a lot of work has gone into this, a lot of thought. And as the chair mentioned, we are now moving into phase 3 of the work and are focusing on the report. So we'll be getting to that to you as soon as we can. The idea being that we're going to present to you an entire draft for your review, and to be able to incorporate your edits, comments before we meet again in July. Next slide, please. And so, oh, yep. So I think Chair Flores mentioned that we'll be considering canceling the meeting next month in June to focus on the report. But in any case, We'll definitely be seeing you in July and then presenting to the City Council in September. So just as, again, kind of quickly reviewing the report outline in year one implementation plan, we'll have an executive summary with a broad overview of all of the goals and strategies prioritized through this commission's work. Then we'll, for the actual body of the report, we'll have an introduction that includes the background, the letter from the chair, approach, and overview of the process we've gone through, some of the demographic contextual data. And then the next section includes all of the commission recommendations, an overview of the priority populations, and then we'll go through the goals, rationale, strategies, and outcomes, and finish with a conclusion setting up the implementation for year one. So the year one implementation plan will focus on each strategy. And as you remember throughout this process, we've asked you at the end of, as part of the conversation related to each of the strategies, how do we make sure that they focus on racial and social equity? Those will be included as considerations. We just heard about accountability. That is, in my mind, when I think of accountability, I think of outcomes and measures. So we're going to make sure to include the change we want to see and then indicators or how we measure that change. Then we also talked about the importance of being able to know who is responsible for the work. So we'll identify strategy leads and then estimated timeline for the work. There might be some areas where we're not exactly sure, but for the most part, I think we'll be adding those details. So related to the vision statements, wanted to first thank Commissioner Kayla, Gladys, and Pat for their work drafting the 2 vision statements that we sent out earlier this month that captured their initial thinking for the vision of this commission. And we heard back from a number of folks, not everyone, but what we heard, in fact, was that folks really liked a combination of both of the vision statements. And so we took the essence of the feedback and drafted a very brief focus statement that captures what we heard. So the updated statement, and as we go into this conversation, we'll always keep the group agreements and guiding principles in the forefront to guide our work. And one of the things that we wanted to start with was to make sure to keep in mind the mission statement. So the mission statement was included in the charter. I won't read it through, but I think it's important to consider it alongside of the vision statement. They work together. The mission statement's more specific. The vision statement, the idea is that it's more inspirational, broader, and kind of helps us get to that broader goal. So the vision statement that's been updated, I wonder if one of the commissioners would volunteer to read it. Do we have a taker?
Want me to read the vision statement? I have no problem.
Thank you.
Just
Mr.
the vision
Norm.
statement, or do you want me to start with the, okay, I'll just go. Government and other institutions within the city proactively address structural racism and promote social equity. Over time, this will create a community in which all residents are safe, feel a sense of belonging, have an abundant opportunities, and reach their full potential.
Thank you. And we sent out a version that said over time this will create, and we got a couple comments from Commissioners Kayla and Gladys that recommended that we take out over time because really, and chime in here, commissioners, but to focus on the importance of starting the work now, which was the intention of this. Even though it's a vision statement, we want to make sure to ground it in the present and make sure that this work begins now. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Commissioner Kayla? Okay. Any initial thoughts or comments on this vision statement? We'll have time to go into small groups and discuss the statement, and then we're going to ask for a vote today, but just wanted to get a sense of thoughts for now. If anyone has a burning idea. Okay. Let's go to the goals and rationales. So here, I'll go through these slides pretty quickly. We just wanted to remind you that each of the goals, so next slide, please. So these are the 4 goals as we've seen before, and each of them, if we go to the next slide, has a series of strategies. In this case, goal 1 just has 1 strategy. Goal 2 has a number of them for the first year. They're outlined in blue. Goal 3 also has a number of them outlined in blue for the first year. And because the city is already making progress on strategy 3.5, we're including that as a green. And then goal 4 has also 1 strategy. So that's just to remind ourselves of the bigger picture. But what we wanted to focus on now were the rationales related to each of the goals. And what you'll see eventually in the report is that each of the goals will have their rationales. So what's a rationale? If we go to the next slide, the idea behind this is the rationale section is that we want to make sure that the evidence is clear that we're making a strong case for each of the goals, and why these goals are important for addressing racial and social equity in South San Francisco. We'll include some of the data and relevant information that we've discussed and heard from you throughout these conversations. All right, so for goal 1, again, goal 1, the strategy focuses on establishing the diversity, equity, and inclusion liaison. And so what we wanted to do is to make sure to bridge the rationale with the strategies. So focusing on that, making sure that the liaison represents the city's institutional commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also making sure up front that we're highlighting the relationships with city departments and community members, focusing on strengthening those connections and ensuring that that equity is embedded throughout the city's work. That's really what we've heard throughout our conversations in the commission meetings. Again, with this idea of making sure that there's transparency and accountability in the work, that consideration of needs and priorities of communities of color are highlighted and focused on, and that an understanding of structural racism informs decisions in city services. So that's the policies and practices that we keep talking about in all of our meetings. And also making sure that diverse community members feel comfortable coming and participating in events that are engaged. So increasing engagement overall. So I'm just going to go through these, and we're going to break into small groups to have a chance to hear your thoughts. So goal 2, the rationale for goal 2, reducing the harm of structural racism by reimagining public safety. We wanted to highlight that we heard a call to action in South San Francisco to reimagine public safety, and that must include establishing alternatives to criminalizing community members. And to do that, we really have talked about addressing the complex social issues that occur in our community in South San Francisco, and building bridges between community members and government systems. And focusing directly on intergenerational trauma that's the result of racist systems, including the criminal justice system. So these are not all of the data, but we wanted to present to you the general idea of the rationale for each of these goals. And we'll be including additional data points in the report for you to see later. All right, that was a lot of material to cover, but what we wanted to do is to get a chance to hear from you directly about the vision statement and rationales, and then we'll come back to the larger groups. So with that, I think we're going to break into small groups and have a chance to talk. And Paige, are you busy sending us into small groups? Okay. So I think the small groups will be with Myra and Lisa. Hi, Commissioner Bobby and Norm and Hermes.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I can't turn my camera on for some reason. I think the host has maybe not enabled that yet.
Yes, they just made you a co-host. Sorry about that.
All right, thanks.
Hello, everybody.
Sorry, I was late.
Hi, Commissioner Hermes. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Glad to see you all.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Paige, do you want to show the vision statement again so we can just take a quick look at
Actually, sorry.
that?
Notes.
Right, so again, the vision statement reflects the feedback that we got from a number of commissioners, and we took that feedback and tried to streamline it into a brief but powerful, inspirational vision statement. So I'll give you a few minutes just to take that in.
I would like to start if I have the chance.
Please.
I did respond to the options that you had before. And for some reason, I feel that this one is more generic, more general. That's my first perception. And the reason that we're here is for racial, right? And when it says for all, that, you know, I just feel like it needs to be more focused on what we are here for because we're clearly talking about the difference and the different groups, right? So I don't know, that's my perception from this. And when I read the two options that you suggested, or our commissioners, fellows suggested, I don't know, for some reason, I don't see it right now what I'm looking at. Maybe it's just me, but that's how I feel.
And just to follow up on that, this will create a community which, so there's not as much specificity in terms of which communities.
Yeah, the word all, like, yeah, the word all is, so it deviates the intention of this commission, right? One of my response was, there was no Hispanic mention, for example. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Hispanic group is one of the targets, right? And the people of color. So if we say all residents, meaning all residents, we already here. And I think we already know the difference. So we have to specify. So I'm not comfortable the way it's written right now.
And what do you think if we added?
It should specify Hispanics, Asians, should specify who we're trying to help.
Yeah. And if we added more specificity there, would that get at what you're thinking?
I think I would like, for example, I will feel more identified because the word all is existing without no changes. So if we specify Hispanics, we specify, Asians, Black, then we feel identified.
So what do other folks think?
Well, I mean, Hermes beat me to it. I had the very same reaction as Hermes did. I think it's very important to name the groups of people who are victimized by structural racism. And, South City wants to be very proactive and specific and intentional about these are the groups, particularly the Latino community, communities of color, who we actually need to make a targeted effort toward including them in everything that we do as a city. So I agree. Some form of calling out who are the people. And as Hermes sort of says, we want communities of color to be able to see themselves in this statement. And, so.
Great. So do you think this captures, when we add that, make sure to bring that back in?
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, I like that.
Thank you, Bobby.
No, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Other thoughts? All right.
Question on this. I agree with what they're saying. You want to identify those who have been, by all history, left out of the equation. Now, how do we address this so you don't have the other parts of the community, the seniors, those with mental illnesses? We do have a white community too that have their problems. I mean, so I agree with that statement, but you don't want those looking in who are not part of these communities feeling that they've been left out. That's the tricky part, because you want these, which have been addressed, to be identified. But right now, it's like telling the residents, if you're a Black, Hispanic, I happen to be Portuguese, so I'm part Hispanic, so I'm covered. Well, I'm going to preface that before I make that statement. But that's my only question I would have when it's being read by non-members of South City who aren't part of these identified communities that may have their own internal issues. That's more of a statement, not a disagreement to what was said there.
I hear that, and I think my response to it is, this is the statement of South City's approach to racial and social equity. So I think, this is the place where we call out people of color and our issues. And it's really, structural racism, doesn't view white people the same way it views people.
I agree. And I agree, Bobby.
Yeah, no, therefore, no. And I think, we get it, because, we've been, we get it.
Because, you're good, Bobby, because we're going to have those bigots out there that read this, and we can't change that, because a bigot's a bigot.
Right.
I'm not condoning
and to that point, if statements like this, start the conversation.
I agree.
About, why single out these particular groups? Well, there's an answer to that.
I agree. And I'm going to preface that. No, I agree. Because they have been disenfranchised.
Right. And the language here, I think, is really nice, in that it's historically marginalized, disenfranchised, which is it's inclusive enough of those excluded communities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the one thing I'm glad that they did eliminate that was kind of open-ended was when they had the first mission statement. And even though the statement was very true, is we don't want decisions made by one group or one in the city. Now that's true in any city. Whoever's in power at the time, no matter what one's, that was one of the very, very first statements that came out. We had the vote on 1 and 2. I was questioning what the message they were trying to deliver on that one line, but otherwise, I agree with the point here.
Right, and I think to what you're saying, what I'm hearing is also, you know, this is the vision statement for the Commission on Racial and Social Equity. And again, I think that really is the bridge to calling out being specific. So sounds like,
because if they look at the title, Kim, you've said it, the title is social equity. I mean, it's kind of, if they can't figure that out, of course, it's like people who figure the election was whatever, that's another whole group of people, you know.
All right. Well, we'll bring this back to the larger group. Let's look at, I think we're going to look at the rationales, and we have a few more minutes left.
15 minutes, so about we're on time, so about 7 minutes for one and two. Yep.
Okay, so we're on goal 2. Did we just flip quickly through 1?
Oh, sorry.
All right. So, you know, this is sort of a general concept that we wanted to check with you. It's not everything. It's sort of the frame for this rationale. And wanted to see if you have any particular key feedback or if you feel like something's missing. And it will be built out with additional data.
I'll lead off on this. I think I had made the statement when you're talking with liaisons in all departments. I think you have to have structural accommodations that the department heads in all these departments are held accountable. They review it. They have programs like we have to make sure it's part of their messaging. I mean, and their accountability, that it's just not taken as a chore that, or they think I'm just because I'm fair. I'm trying to get the wording, but it has to be pushed to department head who answer to the city manager or a liaison officer, if that's what they have. They have to be part of their goals or their job requirement that equity in their department is maintained. And any kind of bigotry that should surface, because there are individuals that are bigots, that it's be unaccepted and be dealt with on an individual case basis.
Thank you. That's a great point. It also links to what we've heard and what I think is here, but just back to accountability and making sure that this work happens, because otherwise, that's the whole point of this commission, all of your time that you've put into this.
I would like to add that, you know, once we finish here in July, I think it would be a good idea to at least the group that we're together right now to at least gather once or twice just to see how it's actually implemented, because at least we know what we're trying to achieve. We could be better, we can give you know, some suggestion if something is not going the way that we would envision.
Right, and this might be that opportunity with the Community Safety and Equity Advisory Board, right? That might be the place, along with the liaison. I see them, you know, the liaison maybe moving that work forward. And you do have the vision. You all have that, you know, kind of plan to see how it might come alive. Other thoughts on this, the concept or the framing of this goal?
No, I like it. I mean, it's ongoing. You know, it's not set it and forget it, right? It's it's continuing to keep measuring and keep evaluating and keep asking questions. And no, I like that as a #1 goal.
Mm-hmm.
The bill what Bobby says, it's 100% right. There has to be constant monitoring and constant looking in, questioning, constant. I mean, it can't just be, gee, let's look on every quarter. That's unacceptable. It has to be, you know, use the expression day to day, so they know that they're going to be accountable for it.
And it looks like, Edith, you have your hand up. Did you want to add something? Edith? If you do, we'd love to hear it. But maybe it looks like Hermes. Oh.
I just realized she had, I think, got kicked out and then so wasn't able to speak, but I think you are now. Sorry, Edith, I just didn't see you.
Yeah, I apologize. I was kicked out by Wi-Fi and then I came back and I was raising my hand just to be able to be part of it.
I appreciate that.
I just got back, so I'm sorry.
Welcome back. We just were focusing on this rationale. So the idea of like how we frame this goal and if anything's missing, if you have any feedback. So we'll come back to you maybe, but Commissioner Hermes, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I love all the work that we're doing together. But I like to, I want to highlight a couple of things that have been happening, especially in Old Town. There is the vaccine clinics coming to Old Town is really a huge sign of the county and the city that shows care about the community. And I think that is actually putting the boot on the ground. And with that, the only site that we have available for this type of events are on Linden, the parking lot and the green area. So this is what I tried to mention at the beginning, that if we have the site, we can do events, we can engage with the community, and we can actually show the city, the county could actually reach out to the communities that are in disadvantage by having the place, having like the community center. So this a good example of the vaccine clinic, a successful event here proves that having a place is really a good way to engage the community. If we don't have the place, we cannot make it happen. So I want to highlight that.
Thank you. And so this conversation is, I'll just take comments from commissioners. And if anyone else is interested in adding a comment, maybe we'll have to wait until public comment. So I see Dolores Piper, your hand is up. We invite you to join during public comment. I think what I'd like to do then is move us to goal 2, the rationale for goal 2. And if you have any other thoughts, we can always go back to anything, but just want to make sure to get your take on goal 2. So the frame that we're thinking about based on our conversations to reduce the harm of structural racism by reimagining public safety is what I outlined earlier, focusing on the call to action and that we must establish alternatives to criminalizing community members by addressing complex social issues, building bridges, addressing intergenerational trauma, and focusing on changes in the criminal justice system. So wanted to just reach out and see what you think about this frame. Any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would like to speak about that. As far as public safety, it's very interesting, the name that we have right in front of us, reimagining. Well, last night we had the Samtrans Reimagine Samtrans, and one of the common topics was bus stop shelters, the need for those. For example, on Airport Boulevard, at the end of Linden on Airport Boulevard, that area needs more illumination. It needs more, light, perhaps a camera or something, especially for seniors, nowadays for Asian seniors, racism. So the answer that we got from Samtrans Reimagine was, we gotta work with the city. So they didn't have an answer for that. So here is an opportunity for us as a city, for us as a social and racial equity, to work together with Samtrans Reimagine to make a public safety actually, work for the community. Mm-hmm. And I'm just mentioning that area because I'm familiar with that area. There is quite a few bad events on that area. But if we don't provide light, camera, some sort of a safety, it will keep happening and just brings, so my message would be to work with Santrams, and the bus stops are public areas where there's always people there, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
I was wondering, in looking at this one, if there's a reason why we use the word public safety sort of consistently throughout this document and not police or policing. I think like the issue is policing, right? That's what the call to action has been about. And I think to sort of, just again, speaking very clearly to people, this is about police. And so public safety and policing in the title might be, because there are police have a role to play in public safety, but as our discussions have highlighted, there are probably other institutions, organizations, departments that have maybe, better equipped in certain ways to address public safety writ large. So maybe, breaking those two out a little bit. So on the one hand, we're showing the community, we hear you when you say, alternatives to policing, defund the police. We hear you when you raise issues around police. And then we're also thinking about police as part of a larger public safety reimagining.
Yeah, that's right. And I think also the strategies that have been prioritized are related to that as well. So the mental health crisis.
Exactly.
Team. Yeah. So yeah. I think that is a direct response to, like you're saying, the policing piece.
Yeah.
Commissioner Edith, do you have your hand up?
Yes. Another thought that just came out is about, I think what I see maybe missing in here too is having bridges, having cultural brokers in the community within, again, the community that needs this information, and just as Commissioner Bobby said right now, the policing too, right? So what is that? How do we create bridges into educating both sides so that we can accomplish some kind of a compromise and working together, because there's been so much trauma in South San Francisco. So how do we support both sides so that we come into terms to be supportive in a way that at the end, we're reimagining the public safety of the community who's been most affected by policing.
Thank you. How are we doing on time, Paige? Do we have a few more minutes?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, well, we got through both goals and the vision. And again, this is exactly the kind of conversation we want. We're not gonna vote on the rationales today. We're gonna kind of we wanted to get the sense of, how are we doing? Are we in the right direction? And I think with this feedback, we'll take another pass at it, at each of these rationales, and then add the data. Any other thoughts before we go into the larger group? Thank you, Paige, for taking notes. I think we got everything folks said.
So
the good news is
2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Go ahead, Edith.
I was just going to say language barriers, maybe added somewhere, because I think in South San Francisco, there's also a lot of, language has a big component when we try to have that communication open between both sides.
Right, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. We're sort of keeping the goals separate, but we do see the strategies as cross-cutting. And so, even though I think the idea of the promotores and I think there's a way to link that through and to kind of weave through the various strategies so that they're cross-cutting. And it looks like.
If I can add one word here.
Yeah.
I do like the policing. Can we add practices or policies one of those in there, like, you know, public safety and policing policies or practices, how we want to, it kind of makes it, we as a commission want them to look in to make sure that we.
Great, yes. And it looks like we might be all back, is that right? Are we back?
No, not yet.
Not quite. Oh,
one more minute.
The group looks much larger, and Nayeli's here. Hi, Nayeli.
Yeah, we did finish a couple of minutes early, so folks are starting to trickle back.
Great. Well, we were just adding a few more thoughts to the goal 2 rationale, the frame of that. I'll be curious to hear what your group has to say.
Just gonna give the last group the full amount of time so they're not cut off.
Yeah, and I'll explain too that the rationales, we're just gathering input, but the vision statement we're really hoping to finalize and approve today. So we've got some language that I think is gonna get us there. We'll see. But maybe if folks from my small group want to add anything after I summarize, that would be great. All right, so if we go back to the goal, I mean the vision statement there. All right, so maybe what we could do is look at the notes from our group while we're talking through the feedback that we heard from our small group. So our small group included Commissioner Hermes, Norm, also Bobby and Edith, and a couple of other folks. And we had a great conversation focused on, you know, again, just kind of grounding us in the fact that this vision statement is for the Commission on Racial and Social Equity. And so the idea is that this is the place where we could be and want to be more specific about the focus of this work. And so instead of, we brought back in some of that specificity that was in the original draft visions. And so wanted to offer the teal color language. So keeping the first statement there, but this will create a community in which Black, Hispanic, Latinx, and other residents of color and historically marginalized, disenfranchised residents feel safe, feel a sense of belonging, or are safe, feel a sense of belonging, and have abundant opportunities in order to reach their full potential. How does that align with other feedback that we heard? Myra or Nayeli?
Yeah, well, definitely with what's going on lately, to add the Asian, you know, AA Pacific Islander, you know, to add if there's the call outs, because in our group, which included Commissioners Flor, Edith, started with us, and then Kayla and Vanessa, and there was the mention of maybe call out the groups and be very specific because of the realities of what we're in our time. Do you want me to go on with others, or you want to stick with that one point right now?
Well, we want to get to a point of potentially voting. So any other edits that you want to add? And Paige, do you want to just add Asian community in there?
Yes, although we won't be voting until after public comment and large group discussion.
Right.
So.
But I can, yeah, I can also add the feedback from my small group, which was Commissioners Jeff Azzopardi, Mark Nogales, Mike Futrell, and Gladys Balmas. The overall feedback was that folks found the vision statement proactive and positive and broad enough that it could stand the test of time. They felt the first part of it resonated really well, and like the focus on inclusive community. I think in the impact on community, the one kind of maybe potential edit is there were questions about what the other institutions in the first sentence, government, where it says government and other institutions, what it refers to, you know, like what institutions are we speaking about, to clarify and do it in an accessible way to make sure that, you know, people can understand it when they're reading it.
We had a comment, we had feedback similar to that of why not expand this and call out and say, not just government, but the city of South San Francisco and partners around the city and other organizations that the city's involved with and the community, and just really expand on that to not just limit it to government and related institutions.
Right, because this is a vision statement. So we get to be broad and bold, I think, here. Okay. So what do we think about where it's going now? Any other initial thoughts? And then we'll keep going with what we heard from folks about the rationales. This looking good? Is it reflecting what we heard? Being proactive.
What's the community going to be added with the city and partner organizations?
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Right, I think we can maybe get rid of that. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay. So I think it's time then to look at the rationales. Lots of real-time edits. Thank you, Paige. All right. So we actually have our edits in this box included. So maybe I'll start with Myra or Nayeli to see what you
again, the feedback about adding liaison as a description raises the question, how much influence, and it's a true question, what does liaison mean? And obviously the position would have to have a certain amount of influence for effectiveness. And so that's the question. When you add liaison to the title, what's the implication?
Okay.
I will say,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not seeing this as the actual title. Cities typically say diversity officer or chief diversity officer or something like that, but it should be a title which in and of itself denotes that this person has influence and a seat at the table.
Thank you for that clarification. Nayeli.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that. In our group, people talked about specifically on this first dot here, this point that Commissioner Mike Petrel just made about selecting the right person, and that it's, you know, clarifying if they're housed within the city manager's office, which will ensure, you know, that influence, and it'll be really important to be able to build relationships and communication. Explicitly indicating who that person would be reporting to, that they're reporting to the city manager. And, you know, it just really speaks to that, the big commitment that the city is making.
Thank you. And then I'm just looking at our other notes there. I think it's captured in what we've heard so far, but the way that our small group pointed out the importance of relationship building and broad institutional commitment, it'll have to be ongoing, kind of the feedback loop of what's working, what progress are we making? Do we need to modify strategies and approaches? But it really emphasizing that the constant and ongoing nature of the work. And then I think the last point, let's see, the last point there at the bottom.
Recommendation about implementation that potentially the commission reconvene at 6 or 12 months after the report, which might end up being kind of delegated to the safety advisory board, or we can see.
That's right. So just thinking, I mean, there was a lot of, recognition of all the work that everyone on the commission has put into this work, really, that you're the champions of this work. And you want to, the idea was that what if you reconvened to see how things are going, check in to make sure that things are on track. And then we just talked about the relationship between this, equity officer and the community safety and equity advisory board, and that logically those strategies would be working together, and that would be an important way to create institutional change and accountability opportunities. Okay, anything else on goal 1? And again, this is, the idea with the goal 1 is to get your sense about the framing of the goal and how it leads into the strategies that you've prioritized. We don't need to wordsmith or kind of go through every detail, but we wanted to get the general idea if we're headed in the right direction for this one.
Can I just add a couple of things on the second area here for this goal? Is maybe kind of along these lines, or small group had feedback about what transparency and accountability means. So adding more descriptive language about how that happens. And then when we're talking about structural racism on the next arrow, to add institutional racism. And lastly, again, with the third arrow is important to say how we do this, how we do engagement with disenfranchised community members. So adding a little bit more descriptive language.
Thank you. Very important points. Okay, so let's go to goal 2 and get your take on the framing of that goal.
So we actually had a great wordsmith suggestion. Commissioner Kayla caught something that I think the rest of us didn't really think about. It's wordsmithing, but when you say reduce the harm, you imply that you're going to accept keeping the racism, but let's just make it less harmful, as opposed to having a broad goal and vision of getting rid of it, which is lofty, but aren't goals supposed to be lofty? Aren't visions supposed to be the big dream we have out there? So eliminate as a goal.
Eliminate the harm of structural racism.
Okay. Well, eliminate structural racism.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So the goal would read eliminate structural racism.
And do it by, ticking off a bit at one bite at a time, but it would be that big umbrella.
Okay, can we add that language there?
I'm just curious how others feel about that, because I worry that, and obviously it's your commission, so I will do whatever. But I worry that if we change it to eliminate the harm of structural racism, that can't be achieved only by reimagining public safety. So that feels like a worthy, certainly, goal, and something that I think we're reflecting in the vision. But I don't know if it makes it overly broad for this goal that is about public safety and potentially policing, as Bobby mentioned in our group.
What about eliminating the impact of structural racism?
Thoughts, folks?
To include the word policing, it could be eliminate structural racism in policing, of policing, by reimagining public safety.
So eliminating the impact of structural racism in policing or of policing by reimagining public safety. Okay. So let's hear a little bit more from the feedback from the groups on the frame, and maybe we'll come back to the goal itself. Nayeli, you look like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I think an overall theme in our group was that they weren't sure that the wording on the rationale, the dots at the bottom were specific enough, or that the wording went far enough, specifically in that second dot about alternatives to criminalization. So like, what were those alternatives? However, there was also a point that a lot of folks talked about, which was, this is something that a permanent group would take on, right? The whole country is grappling with this issue, so that they agree that they'd like to get more specific and, kind of specifically thinking about those alternatives in ways that honor, like that there's a balance or middle road between, criminalizing on one end of the spectrum and, the police department building relationships with community. So to be able to address that spectrum, and so that it'd be up to the new, hopefully fingers crossed, commission to define those alternatives as they have more time and more resources to do that, and also track what other cities are doing and learn from those promising practices.
Excuse me, that's almost identical to the conversation in our group. Commissioner Vanessa and Commissioner Floor and all commissioners weighed in on that. Actually asking to call out and defining the underlying issues, from mental health to the unhoused to, those things, to give it some focus in bullet number 2. And then let's see. And then the question of, there's talk of community engagement, community feedback. Well, will there be a way within the goals, within the plans, within the strategies to formalize that, to make sure that that actually has a structure within itself?
Right, and I think what we don't see here, but I think what I hear you saying is, making sure that the strategy, which is the Community Safety and Equity Advisory Board, in that strategy, that we see those details laid out so that people can understand, okay, how is this going to work? And likely a lot of that will be as part of the appendix, but we definitely want to make sure that in the body of the report, we give enough information and kind of description so that it's clear. That's what I'm hearing in what you're saying there.
Yes, so it actually has a frame of its own. So it actually has a path.
Okay. All right. And then our small group, was there something else, Myra or Nayla, you wanted to add?
Does anyone from the group have more to add? I guess we're good.
Okay, great. Well, this is really great feedback. Yeah, go ahead.
I just, this was a very, I remember in the meetings, this was probably one of the most contentious items that we went through, and we have to get this one right. It makes me a little bit nervous, the wording even of the goal. So we need to come back to that to make sure that it's clear. Because yes, I understand that the complexity of this work needs to be managed by that group that is going to follow with the work. But I think that I just want to emphasize that here, for example, eliminate the impact, and we're talking about a structural racism. By definition, if you're talking about a structural, you're talking about multiple institutions. So are we talking about institutional racism in policing. I mean, I just want to make sure that we get the wording correct on this one.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any recommendations?
Take time. I think that just to call it out as an institutional, and maybe something that with the feedback that we come back to it, but we got to get it right. That's.
Thank you. Okay. So with this, we've got good feedback on, and actually I'll just say with that, I'm glad you brought that up, Gladys, because that's why we wanted to start with getting feedback on that goal, because we anticipated that we would go through a couple of iterations. So I appreciate you making that point. Thank you. All right, so I think we want to make some time for public comment, and then we'll go back after public comment to look at the vision statement. So with that, we'll be asking folks to talk for up to 1 minute. And then if you, oh yeah.
Kim?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to express something about a recent situation in our neighboring city. That this is a good time for me to.
I think that, yes, thank you.
Yeah. So as commission members and, as commission members and as individuals, we are paying close attention to the Daly City case. And as more information and details become available, we will continue to ask, what can we learn from this? Because learning is a process. The creation of this commission has forced us to be solution-oriented and comprehensive in identifying issues of racial and social inequity in all aspects of governance. Our city staff is currently participating in specified training as we capture lessons learned from Daly City and from tragic events that have occurred in our city and other cities around the nation. The final recommendations of this commission on racial and social equity to the city leadership will outline proactive ways to make changes at the systems level in policies and practices. We recognize the overarching need to build bridges in the community, to uphold transparency and accountability, and to lay the groundwork for these cultural changes. And this will continue into the future. Just want to let everybody know.
Thank you so much for making that clear. I think we want to go back to public comment. And Paige, if you wouldn't mind sharing that slide deck. So with that in mind, in the context, thank you for clarifying that. If there are any community members who would like to speak, we have a minute queued up for each speaker, because we don't have
one person. Just FYI.
Okay.
If anyone else wants to speak, please raise your hand to join the queue.
Great, go ahead, take it away, Paige.
Okay, Dolores, I'm gonna unmute you now, so you should be able to unmute yourself, I think. And are you there, Dolores?
Yes, I've probably forgotten what I was going to say. I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. It's a little off. I'm really liking the work you're doing. I'm liking all the comments, particularly those about Old Town bringing. They need space to do vaccines. They need space to do a lot of things over there. And I think this work is so important, and I'm really energized and inspired by it. I just wanted to make note of an article that I sent to Chief as a party today, and also to the council, yesterday or today, well, yesterday, I guess, in Oakland, there was a man sitting in his car. I didn't read the full thing. I don't know if he'd crashed the car or he was just sleeping in the car, but he had a gun on his lap. And about 20 officers surrounded that car. And it was a citizen who said, leave him alone, we'll get help. And she ran to some activists over there in Oakland that we all know. And they got the mother and everybody surrounded the car and woke him up or whatever. And he got out of there safely and in an ambulance. This is the kind of community coordination that would be so important, because the last fellow who fell asleep in his car, parked on the street with a gun in his lap, was shot and killed in Oakland. So, you know, I'm really happy to see that you're all connecting with what happened in Daly City and putting this all together in a larger context. And it really is encouraging. And I give you kudos for that.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else? So far, no one's raised their hand. So last call. Okay, seeing no one. We will have another public comment period as well. So if you want to gather your thoughts, feel free to join us then.
Okay, so I think now we are ready, if we go to the next slide, to further the conversation about the vision statement. I think we covered the rationales for goals 1 and 2. I feel like we've got a lot to work with there, but we did want to take a moment to see if we are ready to adopt the vision based that includes the edits that we've got written in that we heard tonight. So again, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if do we have any other additional suggested edits or any objections to any of the edits that have been suggested before we then review the process for voting? It's been many months now, and then actually do the vote.
I just had a quick question. In terms where it says promote social equity, don't we also want to promote racial equity as well? Promote social and racial equity? Or is that repetitive in terms of?
It's always good to include.
I think that could work. Thank you, Mark. Any other edits? Are you feeling like this kind of captures that inspirational, bold vision that this commission has worked so hard to identify and work towards? I think that's sort of the litmus test that we want to get to. I see Bobby nodding. You wanted to add anything there? Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh no.
Oh, now we can.
Yeah, I think it fits. I think it fits the bill with the caveat that you know, this is the vision statement. It's not going to be granular, right? It's not going to have every sort of strategy to get us there. But I personally like. I think it's a strong framework.
Okay, thank you.
Bobby, can I volunteer you to a request for you to actually just read it, kind of skipping over the strike-throughs as a...
Sure. For adoption, the CRSE vision statement. The South San Francisco Commission on Racial and Social Equity's vision for South San Francisco. The city, partner organizations, other institutions, and the community proactively address structural racism and promote racial and social equity. This will create a community in which Black, Hispanic, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islander, and other residents of color and other historically marginalized, disenfranchised residents are safe, feel a sense of belonging, have abundant opportunities, and reach their full potential.
review the voting process.
Right. So we have a quorum. We identified earlier, I think we still have a quorum. So what we were going to ask you to do is to vote to approve the statement that Bobby just read with the edits included. And the idea is if you strongly support it or can live with it, that's an affirmative vote. So that's a vote in favor. If a majority of commissioners who are present vote to approve it, then it's approved. And if half or fewer of the commission is in attendance, do not vote to approve it, then we'll have to continue to revise it. So with that in mind, we'll go.
Do we need a motion or a second? I'm not sure.
That is a good question.
I'm happy to make the motion. So moved.
And I'll second that.
Great.
Wonderful. Okay, so Paige, you're going to go.
Sure. So I'm just going to read everybody. We know that some people aren't here, but I'm going to read everybody just in case. Commissioner Edith.
I approve.
Okay. Commissioner Jeff.
I approve.
Okay. Commissioner Gladys.
I approve.
Commissioner Norm.
Approve.
Commissioner Mike.
I approve.
Commissioner Cheska is absent. Commissioner Vanessa.
I approve.
Commissioner Hermes.
I approve.
Commissioner Pat is absent. Commissioner and Vice Mayor Mark.
I approve.
Commission Chair Floor.
I approve.
Commissioner Kayla.
I approve.
Commissioner Liliana, I believe, is absent. And Commissioner Bobby.
I approve.
Great. Well, unanimously of the people who are present.
All right.
Great.
Excellent.
And no abstentions. Finishing this for the records, and then I will go to the next slide. Oh.
Thank you. This is where if we were in person, we would have, I don't know, some sort of balloon moment. I think it's a very strong vision statement. It's going to set this up for a clear demand for work. Okay, so the next section for today's agenda is to focus on the desired outcomes for each of the strategies. We're just presenting a selection of strategies and outcomes for you, just to give you an idea of what will be included in the report. And today we're not going to vote on anything related to these outcomes, but want to get kind of give you a sense of what will be there and gather your initial thoughts on those outcomes. Okay, so next slide, please. Keep going. Let's look. So, well, maybe if we go back to the, okay, so we're on the updates on strategies. So first, what we wanted to do is to give you an update, as we have in past commission meetings, on progress for some of the key strategies that were moving forward early on. So I think I'll pass this over to Mike, Commissioner Mike, for a couple brief updates.
Sure. The dedicated equity and inclusion officer is moving forward. I've mentioned in the past, due to budget constraints this coming year, we will operate again under the construct of having a graduate fellow of racial and social equity, another Sharon Watts, if you care to look at it that way. Hopefully, the economy has recovered 12 months from now such that we can create that permanent position. But for the next year, we are actively recruiting. We received 22 pretty high quality resumes, and we've narrowed that to 6 candidates that we are now interviewing and hope to have that person hired within the next month. So hopefully in time for you to meet him or her at the July meeting. So that is moving forward. The Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team, I've reported in the past that that's already been approved by City Council. It's been approved by the county. We are actively recruiting. Actually, County Health Department is actively recruiting. They are struggling to find qualified candidates for that because the cities of San Jose and San Francisco are starting robust mental health programs similar to this, and they appear to have sucked up much of the talent in the Bay Area. But we meet every other week with county, and we're still recruiting. As soon as we are successful in bringing those on board, the program will kick off and get started. And then the Community Safety and Equity Advisory Board, that is moving forward in the sense that the resolution for council has been written and will be included in the report, and then council can take that up for action. You know, I know we list these 3. There's actually a 4th that somewhere we need to highlight that has been heavily influenced by this commission, and that is our efforts to eliminate poverty in South San Francisco. So we had a section on economic recovery and jobs, income inequality last fall. And a lot of the language from this commission and in other meetings have influenced the direction the city is taking in creating and standing up a community resource center on Grand Avenue, specifically to address income inequality, help the unemployed, the underemployed, training, career counseling, financial planning, and overall, it's about a $2.7 million investment at this point, which includes $200,000 from the County of San Mateo, and most recently $500,000 from Congresswoman Jackie Spear in the currently being developed federal budget. So standing up this center on Grand Avenue, which is our lowest income census tract. And then we are recruiting now for community navigator and promotores, which will also work there and create some ties into the community, specifically focusing first on the Latinx community. I think that we're really excited about the promise that that might bring. So making people aware of opportunities and then working with them in a safe environment away from City Hall, where we can hope to improve their lives and their families' lives. So I know that's not on this slide here, but you absolutely were a part of shaping the thinking on that, and particularly with the navigators and the promotores. That was one of our strategies for sure that council is already blessed. So just some good work taking place.
Thank you. That's a lot already done, and we're not quite even finished with writing the report. So we'll have to make sure that the latest updates are included in the report so that we're starting from that point on. So thank you for that, Commissioner Mike. So related to those strategies, we've drafted outcomes based on the staff reports that we've seen and reviewed, as well as the conversations that we've engaged with you on in terms of the change that you are interested in seeing related to these strategies. So if we go to the next slide, that is the definition of a desired outcome, is the change that we're interested in seeing. And so with that in mind, we have for the strategy 1.1, so that's under goal 1, that larger goal of ensuring ongoing oversight and accountability. So the strategy established a dedicated equity and inclusion chief or position for the first year liaison. The outcomes or the changes that we want to see is to launch and coordinate the Community Equity and Safety Advisory Board, make sure that that happens, make sure that that's taking place over a period of time, that it embodies what we've heard so far from this commission. And part of that includes increasing coordination and collaboration between city departments, community organizations, and community members. And it also, and we heard this earlier, needs to focus on increasing specific policies and procedures that explicitly address racial and social equity. And so I think that's getting at some of the specificity that we were talking about earlier. So those are some of the concrete changes that we're thinking are related to that first strategy. And we're going to go into small groups again. So I'll just briefly go over each of these, and then you'll have a chance to give us your thoughts. So for the second goal, which I think is being modified, it sounds like from what we've heard so far, but specifically related to strategy, one of the main strategies that we've talked about is strategy 2.1, creating a community wellness and crisis response team. What we've heard in the staff report and also from you is that we have to increase the timely access to appropriate behavioral health resources for those in crisis, especially for people of color in South San Francisco. We want to make sure that people understand how mental health conditions express themselves, so increase knowledge about that, increase effective intervention strategies among law enforcement personnel. So that's directly related to this crisis response team as well. And then decrease police interaction with community members when not necessary. And perhaps even decrease calls requiring police response in the longer term. All right, so related to another key strategy in the same goal, strategy 2.4, and this is what we've been talking about, establishing a community safety and equity advisory board. There are probably going to be a number of outcomes, but we wanted to start with these two essential outcomes. So these changes to make sure that there's increased civic engagement and sense of belonging among community members through this board, and also an increase in community dialogue about public safety and policing with a focus on transparency and accountability. So that's the brief overview, and we wanted to then break into small groups. I think that's next, right, Paige? So we'll be breaking into small groups. And again, for the moment, because we're still drafting these outcomes, we want to have a chance to hear from you. What your feedback is on these outcomes. We'll go strategy by strategy, and then we'll have an opportunity for public comment as well. Okay, so with that, okay, so we have Commissioner Hermes, Commissioner Edith, Commissioner Norm and Bobby, and welcome community members back to the small groups. So let's jump in with this first set of outcomes related to strategy 1.1. I will just open it up for commissioners to comment, and then we can hear from community members during public comment time. Any initial thoughts related to this first strategy?
I would like to start, Kim. Could you please, did I understood well, Mike, that says that on the community, on the, on the dedicated equity and inclusion liaison, is that Sharon Watts? Is that the lady that's going to be? That's what I heard, or I misunderstood?
Oh, he meant because Sharon was the management fellow and a recent graduate. And so I think what he was saying is Sharon has moved on, but someone in that same position like Sharon held. So Sharon was hired as a management fellow, and that person would be the lead for now on that position. So liaison for now, but it sounds like they're thinking about moving that into a more kind of a chief position in the future. That's what I heard.
As a resident and commissioner, I would like to suggest that when the person that is hired, one of the qualities gotta have empathy to the communities and the willingness to work proactive instead of waiting until the community goes to the person. That person, she or he, work proactive with different groups of the communities to present himself or herself in advance. But I will emphasize a deep care of the communities, not an office person. You gotta be out there in the community and be empathetic and really show the care. That should be a very strong checklist for the person. Ideally, if it's bilingual, but doesn't have to be that way. But I think that show that care to really care to the community and be available, because what we experience here is a lot of times, I've had the opportunity to interact with different city members, and they're all different. They have different interests. And it's amazing when you work with somebody that really cares about the community. And that's something that hopefully we can capture.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think we have that there. Commissioner Edith, it looks like your hand's up.
Yes, I want to follow up with Commissioner Hermes, and this is my own opinion. I do think that it has to be bilingual, not only bilingual, but we're talking about South San Francisco specifically. So when we think about South San Francisco, the community who is more in need, if we look at the numbers, is going to be the community that speaks Spanish. So you're going to have a cultural broker who has lived experiences that can connect, because although I agree with Commissioner Hermes, someone can be very empathetic and really proactive, and I could do the same. But if I don't understand that cultural background of that community in need, I might not be hitting all the needs that they have, and might not be even feel competent enough to really understand where they're coming from, because I might not have those lived experiences, and I might have privilege, that the community who we're trying to support does not have. So this is my opinion, that this person would need to speak Spanish and be bilingual.
Okay.
I think I would add to that. It sounds like this is going to be a difficult position to fill. And so, I too think being bilingual has to be, high on the list, maybe not determinative, but it's got to be out there as a very desirable quality for this person. you've got to have credibility with the community, and part of having credibility with the Spanish-speaking community is to be able to speak, informally with them on their own terms. So I completely agree. It would be hard to imagine this person not speaking Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
So, I completely agree there. I had a question. Maybe I just missed something, but the Community Equity and Safety Advisory Board, is that the same? That's one board?
Yes.
Okay, so that's just what we're, okay. So it seemed like there were two different. So it's the Community Safety and Equity Advisory Board, which is one board that this position would facilitate. Okay.
That's the idea. And that's where I know it's a little like, wait, I thought we were over in goal 2 for that, right? But so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
This is where we were earlier kind of saying that I think there's a lot of opportunities, and what we haven't put in here, but I think is also the case, is the connection with promotores and the advisory board and this liaison position. I mean, I think really those strategies that Mike was just giving an update on are moving forward, and they have to work together, I think, to be successful. So maybe we should add something about promotores here too. But in any case, what we have right now is that this liaison position, would effectively launch and coordinate the safety advisory board, increase community, collaboration and coordination, and then, identify concrete policies and procedures that address racial and social equity.
Right, and so I'm wondering if maybe it rises to the level of a goal here, or maybe it's more strategic in terms of once this person gets in place. But it would seem to me that one of the first things that he or she would want to do is to perform some sort of fact-finding sort of audit almost of all of the city departments, and sort of do a deep dive to sort of determine what are the issues here. And some places would call it a diversity audit, but that kind of fact-finding mission, that would be a desired outcome fairly early on, I would think, when this person arrives.
Thank you. That's a great addition. I'm going to move us to the next goal because I think we just have about 7 minutes left. Is that right?
Can I add something before we move up?
Yes,
as far as the Community Safety and Equity Advisory Board, I think we said 9 members, or if I remember well, whatever the number is, it's just a suggestion that have more representation from the area that is much more in need, like Old Town and downtown area. So typically the commissions are formed to be equal through the city, but if we can emphasize to have more representation from the communities in need. If we are 9, at least 2 from this area or downtown, area.
Thank you. Yeah. Great. So let's move to the next set of outcomes. And, I don't want to rush us too much at the same time, because we are going to have an opportunity, when you see these in the report, and there'll be many others, to give your feedback as well. So this won't be the last time. So this is related to the Community Wellness and Response Team, and maybe I'll just kind of see if folks want to jump in on these outcomes. And that's again related to the the Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team. Paige, how much time do we have? Like 5 more minutes?
4.5.
4. Okay. I know does this capture what you feel like needs to be in place? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's move to the next one then. So this is actually your comment. I was thinking about this, Hermes, your comment from before. We can move it over here related to the membership, right? Because then it can just go right in that particular strategy. So thank you. And I'll just pause and see if you have any additional thoughts on these outcomes related to establishing the Community Safety and Equity Advisory Board. It looks like we have about 3 minutes left.
So I like it. I mean, I think it'll take on a life of its own once it gets going. So it's hard to sort of see what will come of it. But this is the a lot of it's going to depend on the leadership and how it's facilitated and kind of what it decides to do. But this is the framework. I think this is what we want to see.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that I appreciate that comment, because I think we need to start somewhere, and then hopefully it will take a life of its own. Mm-hmm. Commissioner Edith, it looked like you might want to jump in.
I want to make a comment.
Well, 1 second, Commissioner Edith.
I would like to make one too.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so we got Edith, Hermes, and Norm. Go ahead.
Okay, just really quick. When I was reading, so increased community dialogue about public safety. When that's stated, are we looking at? Because I was thinking like, how are we going to increase it? Are we thinking of that, or we're just thinking that this is the outcome, regardless of how we do it, how it's going to be done? I mean, should we increase through something that I just feel to me that is missing? How is that going to be? And I'm saying this because, again, I want to make sure, like Commissioner Hermes said before, when we talk about the dialogue and including, so many times the community who is going to be, who is in need is not at the table. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, the dialogue is between us. So among us, we're all talking about, what that community needs, what should we give to that community, but then they're not at the table. They're not here with the dialogue. So I would just, when I read that increased community dialogue, I would just, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Hermes, and then Commissioner.
Yeah, somehow, I hope it makes sense, this one. By personal experience, the dialogue with, when you're in a commission, whoever, I mentioned this before, the secretary, the person that is going to manage this commission has to be careful with the wording that person, or how they communicate. I experienced as a commissioner from the public parking place commission and traffic and safety, that when the language comes from the administrator, for example, the word lawyer, I check with the lawyer, it really intimidates the rest. I felt that way. So the word that when we have this commission together, is very important that this the administrator use the right language that will not intimidate, it will not push away the community. Instead, it should embrace it. So I had to
really making sure that it's community friendly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Norm, I'm going to ask you when we go back into the main room.
That's okay.
Get cut
I had
off.
other comments. So I didn't get a chance. I had people jumping in.
Okay. Well, I really want to hear what you have to say. Okay, so I think we have a little bit of time to go over what we heard from each of the groups and report out briefly on, if we could maybe go back to the slides.
Well, I was wondering if Naomi and Lisa want to share their screens.
Oh, sure. That's a good idea. Does that work, or would it be better to start with ours?
Yeah, Naomi, I don't know if you had more comments. We just had a few comments on the last outcome.
The last outcome on the 2.4 or last outcome on one of the other ones?
Paige, why don't you go ahead and pull up ours? I think that's easier.
That's it. That's actually, I'm glad to hear that, Lisa, because we didn't have a chance to go through the very last one. So I think the collective feedback will balance out. But I'm happy to share to get started with the feedback that we got from at the draft desired outcomes for goal number 1.
Great.
So one of the pieces we heard about is that, folks weren't seeing enough about internal training for staff. Specifically, I think we are, yes, so not seeing enough about internal training for staff. And so currently, Human Resources makes sure that staff get the trainings, standard trainings on DEI and harassment, and that the equity officer would ensure, ideally that training is, happening, that it's relevant, and identifying new training opportunities would be a key aspect of this role. So to be able to track how they're moving forward with that. And then also that, we had a conversation about how the first year the focus of this role will be really on setting up the commission and finding their place. So running the board takes a lot of work, and that'll be the focus, that coordination and tracking, piece. So, specifically for that second arrow on this slide, increasing coordination and collaboration, that stands out as, this is where that person will really spend a lot of time, and then tracking, like, how does this person launch, coordinate, staff the board? How do the commissioners work together and find common ground? That they were recommending that those questions or that language is included into that outcome area.
Great, thank you very much. Myra, do you want to add anything there?
Yes. So our group talked about definitely having a formalized process for the report out, with all of these efforts, so that there is some sense of how are we keeping track of what's going on. Another really good point was we don't know yet the composition of the board, but that's going to be obviously a very important, that'll inform a lot about what happens with the board. There has been, I don't think, a mention of a policy audit or a review of current policies with that lens of the racial social equity and a gap analysis, some sort of audit that looks at current city policies to filter them for where there might be potential problems. And a question from our group asking for clarity on let's see. Oh, Commissioner Kayla, I can't read my own notes. Let's see, was it a new initiative or a strategy? And which bullet did that go with?
My question was just at what level it's helpful to provide input on at this point, because the third original bullet on increased SSF policies and procedures, there's like 20 different things that go into that. And we've talked about it before, and I think you could pull a lot from the job description. And that was just my question. Like, is this even helpful at this point to get that detailed?
Yeah.
That's a great point. And we will be pulling from other conversations that we've had.
And I think Commissioner Kayla also had the question, is the this position, the equity position, is it a strategy or is it an initiative in progress? She wanted clarity on that.
I would call it an initiative in progress, but for the COVID-19 pandemic, we would have already hired this person. So as a stopgap measure, if you will, we're going to use the management fellow for the coming year. But I would call it in progress.
Thank you. I liked our newest commission member.
I do too.
Okay. Then, so I'll just mention our group and then chime in group members. A lot of focus on the fact-finding point that you talked about, Myra, conducting kind of an audit of city departments to make sure that there's an initial kind of, I think, leveling or launching place for the work to happen and focus on that would be a critical starting point for this position. And then also just reiterating, and I think we've talked about this before in prior commission meetings, the important skill set of the liaison or chief, being empathetic, proactive, making sure that they're not sitting in an office, but instead in the community, engaging with folks. And then related to that is a recommendation that the person would need, in order to have credibility, that the person would likely need to be bilingual English, Spanish, and bicultural in order to really be able to listen to folks and understand where they're coming from. So I think anybody from our group that want to add anything? Capture everything? Okay, so goal 2. Thank you. I think I'll just kick it off on this one. Our group felt like the range of outcomes that we're starting with here are capture what we've talked about and the change that we want to see. And so maybe I'll stop there and see if Nayeli and Myra, you want to add anything.
I do. I thought this is a really good question and a call for maybe a closer lens and a closer look from Commissioner Vanessa. She said, rather than the phrase decrease police interaction with community members, because that can be misconstrued and it's not what you want always, maybe look at tying that with decreasing certain types of calls and certain types of interactions as they flesh this out, to make it a little more real, that it's not just a blanket decrease interaction with police. That's not it. It's decrease certain types of interactions in certain types of circumstances.
Thank you.
And define language for that.
And define a little more focused.
Yeah, just to kind of, because I think that we had a good conversation about that last dot. That in my breakout group, they talked about how it's not worded right. For example, just to get more specific, one of the commissioners said they would like to see fewer reactive 911 calls for mental health and kind of more proactive relationship building and engagement from the response team, from that person, the community wellness person or team, to stabilize community members so that long term there are fewer mental health reactive calls. And the other kinds of pieces that came up too, where, when hiring a mental health professional, that there needs to be synergy with the police department about routing calls and getting support, making sure that that team or that person is adequately resourced. So they're excited about this, this opportunity, but just really kind of rethinking that last dot. And then for the third one about increasing effective intervention strategies, we had some feedback about there's currently work to develop more trainings for officers to give them the strategies that they need during the time given before, like ultimately down the line, there are fewer calls, but not necessarily like completely eliminating interactions, because that also means that there is a decrease in the number of positive interactions potentially. So yeah, just really rethinking how to frame that last dot there.
Thank you. And I'll just mention there's a parentheses up there that the Gardner Center is actually going to take the lead on finalizing these outcomes. We did want to include our, the commission's recommendations for them, but did want to just flag that. Okay, thank you. we'll keep working on those. And then the next one is related to strategy 2.4, establishing a community safety and equity advisory board. So let's see, our group talked about, you know, again, we're not showing all of the information here, but really want to make sure that on that .2, increased community dialogue about public safety, the group wanted to know more about how will that happen, who will be included, who will be participating, how do we make sure that community are at the table instead of, rather than we're talking about them. And then the last dot there we added just to make sure that the advisory board is community friendly, that the language used is accessible, and that people feel invited to come and participate. So Myra.
Yeah, we talked about that the advisory board should feel like that safe space for members of the community. So to establish that as their particular, as their reputation and their mission. And also there was a mention of making sure that the board is not, that this advisory board is not just limited to taking in complaints, but has the ability to make certain types of recommendations when, you know, I guess, you know, recommendations have come from some of what they're hearing and receiving. So, you know, that they're not just kind of two-dimensional, that they have, you know, a little more purpose.
And that could actually be listed in the outcomes, because it's certainly included currently in the description, I know. Thank you.
Exactly.
Okay. Nayeli, did you want to add something there?
We didn't actually get to this.
Oh, that's right. You said that. Yeah.
I would love to, for the folks, for the commissioners who were in my group, if anybody wants to, you know, include anything here, I'd love to give them an opportunity to do that. And that was Commissioners Jeff, Mark, Mike, or Gladys.
All right. Well, yeah. Gladys, did you want to mention anything?
No, I think that it was covered with all the other groups' feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, then we're going to go for another round of public comment and then finish our time together up. So for this, if anyone from the public would like to speak, it looks like we have one hand raised. And Paige, I'll let you take it from there.
Loris, you should be able to unmute now.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry, I've missed a few of your meetings and I also came in late in this one. The Community Safety and Equity Advisory Board is going to be made up of whom? Who will make up that board?
Right. So I'll just quickly jump in and say we're in the process of identifying. We've had a commission meeting where we've outlined recommendations for who is going to be on that board, but that is still in the process.
All right. And is this board going to be like chiseled in stone, or is this going to be like rotating members or people changing? You know, we don't want to have people on there that just are there forever, for sure.
That is a good question, and we will take that into consideration. I think that's, I believe that it's on rotating schedule. Mike, I'm not sure the latest thinking on that, but
and we certainly don't need, I mean, we should have experts, but we certainly could also use these community members who have good ideas and don't necessarily have maybe degrees in psychology or whatever else. As soon as school's out, I'll be able to kind of backtrack on what you all have accomplished. I missed a couple of meetings before this, but I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and I think that is on the list in terms of making sure that there's representation from various census tracts and communities in particular. So thank you. Is there any other community members?
Anyone else want to raise their hands? Final call. Okay, seeing none. I'll open it for the discussion. Kim.
Right, so if we go back to the slides, thank you. I don't, you know, we're kind of at the end of our meeting now. I think we've got great feedback on the outcomes, and that was intended to kind of get a sense of, you know, what these outcomes would look like. But we did want to just end with a question. If there's anything else you want to say about outcomes, you will get a chance to see the whole report that we're working on, and to see, you know, in terms of some of your questions about the depth and explanation, and then where the outcomes fit in. It might be a little bit easier to do that when the whole report is together. With that in mind, did want to just ask if you have any additional thoughts about tracking progress.
I'm glad we're going to do it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I want to thank everyone for all their great work. I've seen the progress from the beginning to now, and I'm really excited to see what the report says.
Great. Well, I think, you know, to me, tracking progress is related to accountability and making sure things happen. And that's what I've heard consistently, probably in every single meeting. So definitely we'll be highlighting how that's going to happen, who's going to do it, what it will look like, and how we can keep moving on this really critical work. Okay. So here we are at next steps already. Well, then what we wanted to end with is, again, an overview of phase 3. We're at today reviewing portions of the report. There's a question on the table of, you know, doubling down to get you a full draft of the report so that you can see how all of these pieces fit together, and then give your revisions from there, so that we're able to, on July 21st, come back together and review the document. And then it won't be until September that we present to City Council. So really heading for the peak here, the pinnacle of the work. And with that.
And it sounded like you were saying that it was still a question about June 16th. If that's the case, what's needed to make the decision one way or the other?
So I'm encouraging the members to send me an email to let me know if they agree. And also, you know, if you want our suggestion to get the full report, give you time to read it and really make sure that you review it properly, given, you know, we are pulled into so many directions. So you can totally devote your time to it. And email me, let me know what you think. And like I said, there's still an offer should we need to schedule another meeting. We're also open to that. So just let me know.
Is there a deadline, Flor?
Yeah, next week, hopefully you'll be able, from today to today's 19th.
The 26th.
The 26th. If you can let me know before the 26th what you think and your ideas, and I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. And with that, I think.
And I would like to reiterate Vice Mayor's expression of thanks to everybody who had devoted so much time and effort into this really great work. And again, hopefully this will just not end with empty promises, but really put into practice and implementation for us to achieve the vision of our commission for our community. Again, thank you very much. And if there's no objection, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have
Bye.
a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.